Kyle looked around the room, clutching her emotions as tightly as the tissue in her hand. The smile on her daughter's face, the calm contentment radiating from her husband, it all felt miles away from the storm building behind her eyes. She didn't want to ruin the moment. Not again. There they were, her family, her people, laughing, joking, capturing what appeared to be a perfect moment. A father and daughter beaming, unaware of the weight pressing into Kyle's chest like a stone. Her tears weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They were the kind that fell in silence and said everything. She had always been the one to hold things together. For decades, she was the fixer, the smoother, the one who made life easier for everyone else. Her sacrifices were small and quiet, stacking on top of each other until one day, she realized she was buried under them. And now, all she could do was watch her husband and daughter share smiles like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't disappearing in plain sight. It wasn't betrayal. It wasn't even indifference. It was something more insidious. Comfort. They had grown comfortable with her pain. It no longer surprised them. No longer moved them. It just was. Kyle blinked hard, trying to stop the tears from falling again. She was tired of crying. Tired of hoping someone would ask what was wrong and mean it. Tired of the weight of everything feeling like hers alone to carry. They were talking about something light, a story from last week, maybe a funny moment during dinner. Her daughter laughed, tossing her head back, full of ease and youth. Mauricio looked at her with pride, nodding, engaged. Kyle felt like a ghost at her own table. Her smile was gone, stolen slowly over time by small moments that nobody noticed. The way conversations drifted past her. The way Mauricio answered his phone mid-sentence when she was speaking. The way her daughter started calling her less, texting instead. They were always little things, small enough to excuse, too frequent to ignore. She pressed the tissue to her cheek again. It was damp. Of course it was. This wasn't a meltdown. It wasn't some dramatic breakdown. This was grief. The grief of becoming background noise in your own life. Of watching your family move forward without you while you're still standing in the place they left. She tried to speak, just to say something, anything, but her throat tightened. Her voice didn't trust her anymore. It had learned that words didn't always get received. Sometimes, they just floated into the air, unanswered. Her husband caught her glance for a moment. Just a flicker. Then his smile returned. Almost reflexively. As if to say, don't ruin this. As if her sadness was an inconvenience. That hurt more than words ever could. She remembered a time when that smile meant safety. When his gaze felt like home. Now it felt like a mask, one he wore for everyone else, including her. It was the smile of a man who had emotionally checked out but hadn't bothered to pack his bags. Her daughter stood up, coming around to hug her father. It was a beautiful moment. Tender. Kyle watched it unfold like a scene from a movie she wasn't in. She was the extra in her own memory. She swallowed her tears. Again. Like she always did. The image would be captured forever. A family together, two of them glowing, one quietly breaking. People would scroll past it on social media, write comments like, so beautiful, such a happy family, goals. But no one would see the truth. No one would see that Kyle's silence was a scream. No one would know how much it cost her to sit in that room, to keep smiling through her pain, to protect the illusion. Afterward, when the photo had been taken and everyone dispersed, Kyle stayed. She sat alone for few more minutes, breathing through the ache. She ran her hand across the armrest of the chair, grounding herself, remembering that she was still here, still real, even if they didn't feel her anymore. She finally stood and walked into the kitchen. She didn't need anything. She just needed a minute away from being invisible. She stared out the window, not really seeing anything. Her thoughts were loud. Loud enough to drown everything else. How did it come to this? She had been loyal, devoted. She built her life around them. Every choice, every sacrifice, every late night, every early morning. Her love was never casual. It was fierce, consuming. And yet, here she was, mourning a family that was still very much alive, just not with her in it. She remembered when Mauricio used to kiss her shoulder in passing. When he used to leave little notes, even if they were just, "I love you," scrawled on a receipt. When her daughter used to come into her room just to talk, just to be near her. Those moments had vanished like mist in the sun. And now, all she had were photographs, memories with smiles that didn't match her own. The next day, she tried again. She made breakfast, set the table, tried to engage them both in conversation. She asked questions. She smiled. She laughed, even when she didn't feel like it. She performed joy like it was a routine she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. And they played their parts too, laughing, responding, moving through the scene as if everything was fine. But she knew better. She knew that pretending doesn't fix anything. It just delays the inevitable. After breakfast, her daughter left to meet friends. Mauricio got on a call. Kyle sat at the table alone again. The dishes were still warm. The chair where her daughter sat still pulled out slightly. She looked at it and felt a pang. She wanted to say something profound, something that would shake them, make them see her again. But the words never came. Just silence. Always silence. Later, she scrolled through her phone and saw the photo, the one from the day before. Her eyes locked on her own expression. The slight slump in her shoulders. The forced smile. The tears she thought she'd hidden. And beside her, the two people she loved most, smiling like nothing had changed. She stared at that image for a long time. Not because she liked it, but because it felt honest, brutally, painfully honest. That was the moment she made a choice. Not to leave. Not to fight. But to stop waiting. Waiting for them to ask. Waiting for them to notice. Waiting for someone else to give her permission to feel. She would write again. Dance again. Talk to people who looked her in the eyes and listened. She wouldn't beg her family to see her anymore. If they didn't want to look, that was their loss. She could be happy again, not because they gave her room to be, but because she decided she deserved to be. Later that evening, her daughter called from upstairs. Mauricio asked what she wanted for dinner. Life moved on just like it always did. But Kyle moved differently now. She smiled. Not the kind you wear to survive, but the kind you earn from clarity. They might not understand it yet. But she did. She wasn't fading. She was finally beginning. Always did. But Kyle moved differently now. She smiled. Not the kind you wear to survive, but the kind you earn from clarity. They might not understand it yet. But she did. She wasn't fading. She was finally beginning. Always did. But Kyle moved differently now. She smiled. Not the kind you wear to survive, but the kind you earn from clarity. They might not understand it yet. But she did. She wasn't fading. She was finally beginning. And yet, their faces glowed with effortless smiles, as if the heaviness in her heart had gone unnoticed, as if the unraveling of her world didn't deserve pause. Kyle's silence was louder than anything she could say. Her daughter's smile wasn't forced, it was genuine. She looked radiant, hopeful, untouched by the burden weighing down her mother. Maybe she didn't see it, or maybe she didn't want to. Her father, Mauricio, mirrored her cheer. His eyes sparkled with a kind of peace that stood in stark contrast to Kyle's quiet breakdown. This wasn't a celebration. This wasn't joy. It was the moment Kyle realized how alone you can feel even when you're sitting beside family. The air was still. A warm lamp flickered in the corner of the room, casting soft shadows that danced across the walls. But inside Kyle's chest, a storm raged. Not just about the marriage, not just about the disconnection, but the feeling of being unseen, even by those closest to her. She had tried. Over and over. She had tried to bring it up in ways that didn't seem accusatory, or desperate, or clingy. She didn't want to fight. She didn't want to cry in front of them. But something always snapped, always cracked open like a fault line. And when it did, there was that smile from Mauricio, so charming, so well-trained, that made her feel foolish for breaking down at all. They had changed. All of them. Her daughter had grown. Independent, assured, busy with her own blooming life. Kyle was proud of her. Deeply so. But she missed being needed. She missed the connection that once came so naturally. Now, even as her daughter laughed beside her father, it was as if Kyle was observing them through thick glass. Present, but unreachable. Mauricio's smile was the hardest to endure. There was a time she could read his face like a well-worn map. Now it was a locked diary. His attention was kind, his presence consistent, but his soul was elsewhere. Maybe with work. Maybe with someone else. Maybe just away from her. But wherever it was, she couldn't reach it anymore. Her tears weren't just about sadness. They were about confusion. About betrayal without betrayal. About the pain of watching people you love drift into versions of themselves that no longer include you in the same way. They were still a family in photos, in holidays, in public appearances. But in moments like this, Kyle felt like a ghost haunting her own life. The camera captured it all. That one frozen frame held so much. Her pain, their joy, the gap between them. It would end up online, probably. People would speculate. Fans would wonder. Gossip would swell. But none of them would know the truth, that this was not a dramatic collapse, not a scandal, not even an argument. It was the slow death of closeness. It was the ache of realizing that the people you built your world around have already moved on from the version of you who did the building. Mauricio hadn't said anything cruel. He hadn't stormed out. He hadn't lied as far as she knew. And yet, every day, Kyle felt more invisible. More like a co-star in a show he'd already mentally exited. His kindness felt mechanical. His charm, rehearsed. And worst of all, his smile felt like an apology she wasn't allowed to ask for. She hated crying in front of them. Not because she feared looking weak, but because it made her feel even more isolated when they didn't know how to respond. Her daughter reached out once, gently touching her shoulder. Kyle gave a soft smile in return, not because she was okay, but because she didn't want to ruin the moment. That's what motherhood had become. Managing your breakdowns so they didn't spill onto the people you raised. She'd spent years being the glue. She kept the family traditions alive. She navigated every schedule, every holiday, every unseen effort. She made sure their home felt like a sanctuary. She was the memory keeper, the planner, the protector. And now, no one noticed when she was unraveling. Or maybe they noticed and chose not to look too closely. It was easier that way, wasn't it? Easier to laugh. Easier to pose for pictures. Easier to maintain the idea that everything was just fine. She envied them in that moment. Their lightness. Their distance from whatever this pain was. She didn't blame them. But it didn't stop her from feeling like a bystander in her own family. Mauricio finally looked at her, really looked. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Maybe guilt. Maybe regret. Maybe just awareness. And then the smile returned. As if he decided it wasn't the time. As if he had already made peace with a version of reality where Kyle's tears no longer shook him. It was heartbreaking how polite their love had become. No fights. No shouting. Just quiet exits, emotional absences, and a growing silence that echoed louder every night. Their daughter's laughter filled the room again. She looked beautiful, full of life and joy. And Kyle loved her fiercely for that. But even that laugh felt like a mirror, reflecting how much Kyle had lost touch with Joy herself. She used to be like that. She used to laugh with abandon. She used to feel radiant. Now, she felt heavy. Always holding something. Always carrying weight that no one asked about. The photo would be posted. The headlines might spin it. But no one would know. No one would know that Kyle Richard sat between the two people she loved most in the world, and had never felt more alone. Later that night, the house grew quiet. The laughter faded. The lights dimmed. Mauricio scrolled through his phone in the living room. Their daughter went upstairs to FaceTime friends, or maybe a boyfriend. Kyle stayed in the kitchen, finishing dishes that weren't dirty, just to keep her hands busy. She stared at her reflection in the kitchen window, her eyes still puffy, her mouth still trembling. She whispered a question out loud, not expecting an answer. When did I stop being seen? There was no reply, only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant buzz of life continuing around her. Kyle wiped the counter. Not because it was dirty, but because it felt like the only thing she could control. She missed being touched without asking. She missed spontaneous affection. She missed the way Mauricio used to look at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the room, even when she wasn't. She missed the warmth of knowing her presence mattered. And most of all, she missed herself, the woman who used to feel joy sitting between them. Now, she just felt tired. When she went upstairs that night, Mauricio was already in bed. Eyes closed. Not asleep, but not available. She slid under the sheets, turned to face the wall, let the silence settle between them like a thick fog. She cried again, quietly this time, and in the darkness, she finally said it, just loud enough for herself to hear. "I'm still here, but I don't know for how much longer."